legitimacy of the rule of law really depends on equal justice, and equal justice depends on equal access. So when we explore different tools for improving the access to justice problem, one of them is to face online options. And to talk more about that, we have the CEO of Matterhorn, MJ Cartwright.
Good afternoon. You know, the justice this morning mentioned online dispute resolution, and that really kind of keyed up the conversation that I'm going to really highlight today, because online dispute resolution is a broad topic. It could be online case resolution, all types of getting to resolution can be online, can be mediation, online negotiation. You'll see a lot of terms. The point is that there's ways to utilize technologies to get to resolution. And I'll just go through a quick highlight, but the thing is, how does this impact you? How does it impact your court system? How does it impact those people who need to go through that court system and your clients as you work? So I'm going to take you through a couple slides here and ask you, what are these people doing? What are all these people doing? They are interacting with the world, right? They are working, they're talking to their friends, they're doing business meetings, they're living their lives, they're handling issues, and they're doing it online. And this is classic. I mean, everyone's doing it, and the device of the phone has really changed how we do things. What are these people doing? These people are living their lives. They're with their families, they're at work, they're actually going to work. Maybe this is Chicago in the winter, I don't know. But this is, you know, we're living our lives and we are going about making things happen. Now, what are these people doing? These are people in Los Angeles. These are people in Alabama. These are people in New York City. These are people in El Paso, Texas. All of these people are standing in line to deal with their case, their dispute, their issue with the court system. And so, wow, what would you rather be doing? Spending time with your family, interacting with work, your colleagues, your friends, mobile device, but no, they're waiting in line. So these are really important aspects to think, why would someone do this when they may just let the whole issue go and not stand in line? And if you don't have the time, the dollars, the time off from work, you can't do that. So you think about poor people who have access to our court system. They're in the same sense that the Christians had access to the lions when they were dragged into the Roman arena. And I don't really normally read my slides, but this is a powerful statement from a retired justice in California. And it's so true, and it's so powerful when you think about, why would you even go into the court when maybe it'll go away, right? And you may have a phobia of going to court. You can't get the day off from work and you're gonna get fired. You have child issues, you have medical issues, you cannot get there. And so this not just impacts the people who need to go to court, it impacts our law enforcement, it impacts our prosecutors, it impacts lawyers representing those clients, and also lawyers who are part of the mediation process and the negotiation process and even some of the arbitration processes that occur. And it also impacts the judiciary, the staff, the judges, the justices, everyone who's involved. And so these are things that are really important to be focusing on as we look at solutions that can help. And I may be one of the few or only non-attorneys in the room. And I have great respect for attorneys, and we work with attorneys all the time as we are bringing the system of the court and the processes online. And we kind of have 3 buckets of case types that we have been implementing out across 10 different states across America. Cases that are dealing with some traffic and criminal violations, cases that are dealing with civil infractions that could be small claims, landlord-tenant, April, that case in Nebraska. And also when we're dealing with some of the family and domestic relation cases, pre-decree and post-decree cases, and ongoing child support cases and stuff. These are all cases that are starting to go online. Some of them are just partially online, and you need to go to court and process part of them. Other ones are going online, and some are going online after the fact, after an initial arraignment, or depending what the case may be, if it's a misdemeanor and such. And when we're talking about cases, if you look at your non-online process, you're looking at various parties, whether it's the prosecutor and the defendant, whether it's two parties in a civil case that may or may not be working with a mediator and may or may not be working with the court system. We look at these workflows and we look at how can they be applied online in a way that will work as we proceed. How do they follow the rule of law? How do they deal with the court rules? How do they deal with the aspects of being fair as the process goes forward? These are important things. And I'll highlight a few things as we look at the different stages of online dispute resolution, but I really want to spend time on what we're finding out there. And we're looking at negotiation. I'll show you an example of what it looks like, negotiation. More than 50%, in some cases up to 75% of the cases that we're working with online are on your mobile device. They are all done in mobile environment, so you have to really look at how someone is using that and how you convey information and how you communicate as you're doing that. If it needs to be escalated, how does someone know it's ready to be escalated? Do you give it a time frame? Do you give it how many back and forth? When they get stuck and you suggest, hey, you may want to get to a conclusion here before your court hearing date that is in 2 days, this has to be resolved before then, or you come into the court to resolve it. And then perhaps it's a mediator. And if it's a mediator, it could look like the sidebars that you may have in side rooms when you're dealing with mediators. How do you set that up in a mobile device? I mean, think about it. You have to know what people you're talking to, that you're not talking to the other party when you're talking to your mediator. How do you do that in a way that is very simple and straightforward from a user experience standpoint, and still work with people so that they're comfortable when they have these conversations and these communications? And then when you get to settlement, which is where you want to get ideally, and you want to get to a settlement that both parties feel is fair at the end of the conclusion of this, is all right, what type of settlement and agreement are you dealing with? And being able to bring up those agreements, once again, it's got to come up on a mobile device. And it has to follow the formats and the agreements that you use in court and you use agreements with your clients. And then they have to be able to know what they're signing. They have to be able to check off that they've read certain things. And how do you take them through that in a way? If you think in terms of signing a lease or buying a car, buying a home even, you really actually don't have to be there in person for many of these things. But you do have to consider that some of these legal cases are much more involved, and you have to say, okay, what can be done online and what is just not ready to be done online as we do this. And so when it comes to our outcomes and what we're finding, to me this is really exciting. We are getting the feedback that almost 40%, 39% of the people that are hopping online and using online dispute resolution, 39% are saying they would not have been able to resolve their case otherwise. So they aren't the people who are waiting in line. They're the people saying, no way am I waiting in line. And they are not resolving their cases because they can't, and there's a variety of reasons why. The other is when we look at court staff and court, the judges' data, they are saving 80% of their time on cases that are going through ODR. So that means, as a court, the staff, the judges, they're able to do other things with that time, and they're able to actually work on other cases that cannot go through ODR or may not go through ODR. And from an efficiency standpoint, and really when you look at funding in dollars, 92% of the cases that involve fines and fees, 92% of those are paid within 30 days. And so that, if you go and look at default rates associated with that with courts and such, I mean, you're really getting the dollars in at a quicker pace, the dollars that are specific to that particular case, that penalty or that violation. And the other is really how people recommend online dispute resolution, and something that they said, all right, this can work. I'm going to recommend that others use this. Numbers are very high and very consistent on this. And then, is it fair? And numbers being fair, that's a really tricky evaluation component, and we really are going to spend more time working with researchers like April and others to help us work through what does that mean and what will make it break down those components of fairness. When we look at some of the numbers that come in from family cases that we're doing, these are child support enforcement cases, and we're working with back and forth where you may have a job change, and you have to look at potentially making changes in your post-decree divorce and child support situations, that we're able to work through those, get 29% more child support collected for the families involved. But from the judge's standpoint, we're able to reduce the number of hearings, which the judges, the staff, the security, everything in the court, including the attorneys involved, do not have to be involved in those hearings because they are resolved ahead of time before that hearing actually occurs. And then the other aspect, when you look at warrants, if you do not have to issue warrants to go and find someone to actually deal with their, in this case, child support, the dollars you are saving the community are immense. I mean, the stakeholders are vast when you're looking at that. When we look at small claims cases, and our first small claims court we worked with was in Columbus, Ohio, and we're based out of Ann Arbor University, Michigan. I had to go down to Columbus, Ohio, hide all my U of M stuff so that no one knew. And we really have a great relationship with the Franklin County Municipal Court, and they've gone from 42% of their cases being resolved without having to go to court, and their small claims and their city income tax cases, to 76% of those being resolved before that hearing. So this really helps people get to conclusion faster, deal with their cases, exchange what they need to between the parties without having to come into the court for the face-to-face. And the other interesting stat here is that 34% of those cases were resolved after business hours, after court hours, after hours in which you may meet with them in your offices. And the other outcome, this is one of my all-time favorite outcomes when we're working with courts, and we worked with the Michigan Supreme Court on this, and we pulled information across a subset of courts, some very efficient, some not efficient. And what we found is how long it took to close cases. That was going through the whole process of closing and final conclusion if payments were required, actually paying it. So a very inefficient court, one in a part of Detroit, they really have trouble getting staff to be efficient, to one up in East Lansing, Michigan State Territory, I have to say, which is a very efficient court. And so we have the extremes, and so when we bring in online dispute resolution, we find that the bar, what is the light blue bar, you get the efficiencies and improved time to close cases that aren't even cases that go through ODR. So your court now is able to reduce the number of days to close these cases because you can actually work on those cases without working on all the other cases that are now going to online dispute resolution. And then the online dispute resolution cases are now able to be resolved in what is the average of 14 days. And we know that number has dropped since we did this study with the Supreme Court. But the beauty of it is, yes, you have all these savings in time to close cases, but you also have this leveling of the playing field. So if you have a very efficient court, yeah, you're much more efficient. If you had inefficient court, you're as efficient as that efficient court now, because you're actually using technology to level that playing field. So for your constituents, you can provide access to justice in a very uniform way. And a couple other stats that we find interesting is that 90% of the public who use online dispute resolution really feel that, yeah, my case was handled efficiently. 90% actually understood what was going on with the status of their case throughout the process. And I don't know if you can say that. I'd be curious what the number is for those who are going through the non-online case. Do you always know what's going on with your case? Because it's not always easy to explain that and to understand that. I talked about this stat earlier. And one of the things that we do that's very meaningful for us is that we spend time with our team and look what people are saying. And there was a gentleman in the Grand Rapids area, and the court was using online dispute resolution to resolve cases before they became warrants, and reached out and found a gentleman who was going to get a warrant. He was living with his daughter, and he had just gotten a job, and he was thrilled that he did not have to get a warrant. Then he couldn't get his job. He was just setting up to rent an apartment, and he didn't have to go into the court, and he was able to do it all online. move on to his job, and actually get his apartment. And so we hear these cases all the time that are very meaningful. People are dealing with their cases. At the same time, they are getting on with their lives, and they're not just getting a free ride. They're dealing with them and moving on and not having to access the court for every aspect of what they're doing. And for us, so what are these people doing? What do you think these people are doing now? I think they're handling their cases. I think these people are not just letting it go. They know that they can handle them online. They know they can get on with their lives. They can, yes, I've handled that and I can move on. And we're seeing it, over 65,000 transactions and cases that we've done online, and that continues to grow as we move forward. So it's a very exciting time to be working with attorneys and the courts as we do this.